On today's Tech Help for Churches, does your website have what it takes to podcast? Hi, and welcome again to another episode of Tech Help for Churches. This is the show where every week I help you with new media, social media, the internet for your church. My name is Paul Allen Clifford. Well, first off, I do have to say, I say every week, but recently it hasn't been every week, so I apologize. Let's get back to it. That's all I'm going to say about that in the immortal words of Forrest Gump. So let's talk about podcasting and a website. So there are really two ways to podcast with a website. You can just put the link in and get your RSS feed generated some other way, or the way that I do it is I have my website generate the RSS feed. So that's the first question you need to ask. Do I need my website to generate the RSS feed? If you do, your options are more limited, but you'll probably end up with better control and perhaps even a better podcast as a result. So what I recommend, just since I've been podcasting for 10 years now, is WordPress. Now, some people will say, well, that's not as easy as fill in the blank. Not as easy, true, but once you get it set up, really it's not all that hard. And you've got a couple of key features. You have portability. You can always leave your web host to go to another web host. They're a dime a dozen, so you can choose one that works right for you. You can change your theme at any time to change the look, and you can download your content at any time and keep a copy locally, keep a copy in the cloud somewhere, etc. Things that you can't necessarily do with every other web host. Also, because WordPress runs the vast majority of websites out there, there are plugins that make things easier. So one of those plugins, and the one that I recommend you use, is PowerPress. PowerPress is one that's created by Blueberry, BLUBRRY.com, which is a podcast hosting service. Now, the way they work is they host the media and then use this plugin on your website to create the RSS feed. Now, what you should know is their chief competition, Libsyn, which is actually the web host, the podcast host that I use, they generate their own RSS feed, and in many ways it's a superior feed, but it's also a more limited feed. So the reason that I don't use the RSS feed from Libsyn is I've got 4 shows. And that's actually not true. I actually have 7 shows because I have 3 that are video and audio and 1 that's just video. So that's 7. As a result, I need a lot of feeds. And so I actually have 8, I believe. 1 for each of the shows in each of the formats, and then 1 for everything. So that's something that Libsyn can't do unless I paid a lot of money, and this is my business and I'm paying for everything, so got to be creative. So that's something for you to consider with your church is how many feeds do you need? If you need a feed for the children's ministry, for the youth ministry, for your regular sermon, then maybe you need to go with a self-hosted WordPress site and Blueberry to create all those feeds. Now, it could be that you only need 1 feed, in which case, if you host with Libsyn, it's pretty simple. You just take their feed and use that when you submit to iTunes. Make sure that whoever you use for your podcast host, which shouldn't be your web host, by the way, just as an aside, that's betting against your own success. that's hoping that things don't go well and saying, well, I've never had any problem, which at any moment could change. So every time I hear that, it just raises my hackles just a little bit, because it's just dangerous, a dangerous game to play. So if you go with a podcasting host other than Libsyn or Blueberry, there are other good ones out there, but make sure that you can move your feed. Because if you can move your feed, then you have control over it. If you have a billing dispute, you can move your feed. If you decide you find a better deal, you can move your feed. If you decide that the feed, which was really for the pastor, needs to go with the pastor when the pastor moves to a different church, you can move that feed. You see, you have a lot of control if you can move the feed. But if you can't, you don't have any control. So, is your website able to do that? Are you able to move the feed? Are you able to embed links? Are you able to just do all the things that you need to do with a podcast? And just saying, yes, we have podcasting support isn't enough. You need to check what they mean, because there are all kinds of web hosting providers, and I'm thinking specifically of the ones that are a big draw to people that aren't web developers, things like Wix, Weebly, or Squarespace. Squarespace might be a little more flexible, but the other two, I just don't know how easy it is for you to move your feed when you're in a situation that you need to. And I'm not sure how easy it is to move your information when you're in a situation that you need to. And this goes even more for the Christian web hosting companies. I'm sure that there are some very good ones, but I hear horror stories from time to time of churches that say, oh yeah, we have everything on this company's web hosting platform, but we've outgrown it and we need to move, or there was a billing dispute, or fill in the blank. So when it comes to determining if your website is capable of doing a podcast, you need to answer the following questions. How many feeds do I need? Whatever solution I'm using other than my website, does that allow me to move my feeds? Can I export everything and move it onto a different provider should I need to? If I outgrow it, let's hope that's why, or if I find that it just doesn't meet my needs. That's a great question to ask as well. So these are all questions that you should be asking as you're planning on doing a podcast and as you're planning on just preparing for the future. Because, like Jesus said, you've got to count the cost before you begin an endeavor. And podcasting is like building a house. If you have a good foundation, then it can last for years and years and years. If you have a horrible foundation built on sand, it can just totally collapse, and it could be that your church is left holding the bag. Well, I hope that helped you. I hope that now you know some things to think about when you're deciding if your website is ready for a podcast. If you like this content, I bet you'd like my email newsletter, so by all means head over to trinitydigitalmedia.com/subscribe. There you can pick up a copy of my email newsletter, where I'll send you even more tips and tricks and discounts to some of my cool courses. Until next time, this is Paul Allen Clifford with trinitydigitalmedia.com. Go out and change eternity.